I'm Jimmy Clouse. My wife is Miriam Clouse, and we have 2 kids. Talon, who is 7 months, and Journey, who will be 5 in just a few weeks. I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia. My dad was an extreme alcoholic. Pretty much every day he would come home drunk, especially after work. He abused my mom, my sisters, me with whatever object he could find at the time, whether it was his hand, a belt, 2x4s, whatever was close by. And there were times that I would come home from school or after swim practice when I was in high school and have to walk over his body. He had tripped into the doorway and he was passed out. It took a toll on me growing up, and I'm sure it took a toll on my sisters and my mom. My grandmother and grandfather lived in Denver. I had a really close relationship with my grandmother, and when I was 12, it was that summer, it was August, that we got a phone call. We were living in Virginia, and we got a call that my grandfather had murdered my grandmother and my uncle. My mom and my dad flew out to Colorado for the funeral. Before my dad flew out, he wanted us to write a letter to put in the casket of my grandmother. I remember that letter saying how confused I was that my grandfather had just killed her. But I also remember writing that letter about how I wish that was me too, because of just the abuse and just the pain that was happening at our house in Virginia. I wish that I was no longer living. And it was 17 when that almost became a reality. I remember taking a gun out of my dad's safe, then heading down to the beach and put the gun up against the side of my head, and I still remember my hand just shaking. And I was so scared that I just put it in my mouth. And I was ready to pull the trigger. And I just remember just dropping that gun to my side and just crying out to God to save me. And it felt like a breath of fresh air. I felt like I just heard all the sounds around me. I heard the waves crashing, and I put the gun back in the truck, and I drove home. And the next morning, it was a Sunday morning, and I remember driving myself to church. I remember walking down the aisle, asking Jesus to be my Savior, to be my best friend. And I remember that day had completely changed me. I'm not like my dad. No matter how many times Satan tries to put that in my head, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not abusive. I don't do drugs. I'm not going to die at an early age like my dad did. But the faith that I have has led me here, and there have been many times in my life that I have walked out in faith, not about the feelings, but about the faith in Jesus, that I am definitely a changed man.